Welcome to the Innovators and Investors Podcast. I'm Kristian Marquez, founder and CEO of Finstrat Management. At Finstrat, we provide CFO-led accounting, finance, and reporting services to assist clients monetize their business. Stick around to the end of the podcast and I'll share how you can be our next guest. Now on to the show. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Innovators and Investors Podcast. I'm your host, Kristian Marquez, founder and CEO of Finstrat Management. Super excited. We have with us Michelle Cole, partner at Paragraph. Michelle, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Kristian. Looking forward to talking today.
Yeah, and so why don't we kick things off with a little bit of background on Paragraph?
Sure. Basically, we are a $10 million fund that is investing in B2B SaaS products that are in the future of workspace. And we are excited to build about 15 companies in the next 5 years. And so just lots of different things going on.
And in your role inside, I know you have a unique operational experience that you're bringing to the fund. Would love to hear about that experience as well as how Paragraph is using your background.
Sure. Prior to this, I was the CEO for Envisage Technologies, which was a software business that was focused on homeland defense and automating training academies and helping keep them in compliance. And through that role, when I first started, I was like one of the teens in terms of the early employees. And when I exited that business, we were probably 150 people. So the COO role basically did not handle the sales and didn't handle the accounting, but anything else that you can imagine that a software company did, I've done it at one point or another. Ideally, we were growing all the time, and so I would be working to shed activities. Marketing was mine for a period of time, and then as we grew more and more, then marketing got its own person, and customer care was with me for a while. And then as we grew and grew, then customer care ended up with its own VP. It was really super exciting. I've worked for Fortune 1000 companies before. I've worked for startups prior to that experience, and always been the person who focuses on systems and systems thinking and how we might improve things as we go. And in a lot of software companies, as you're growing, what worked yesterday doesn't work tomorrow, and you don't have the same money at the beginning as you have further along the journey. So a lot of times you can't afford a lot of the software that you might want. And so as you're using some kind of just bubblegum and shoestring kind of stuff at the beginning, and then you're having to do a lot of data migrations and implementations of new software as you grow and gain efficiencies. So all of that experience was something that I was bringing to the table when Mike and Brad and I started talking about wanting to get together and do something.
Fantastic. And for the benefit of our audience, what sense can you give us as to the size of the exit?
It was in the multiple 100 million.
Okay. So a significant amount of experience taking.
Largest exit here in Bloomington.
Congratulations. So then if it would be great to unpack your experience as it relates to product market fit. And I hesitate to say it's a hot topic in so much as a lot of successful companies ultimately find product market fit, whether it was today, 10, 20, 30 years ago. And it seems to be the holy grail.
Oh, for sure.
Amongst founders, boards, and investors. And so I would love to hear what your experience was like in getting to product market fit.
We didn't talk about it, but my undergrad is in psychology and sociology, and my master's is in IT. And so when I think about a product, it's always in relation to who's going to use it and what they need. And usability and all of those sorts of things have always been near and dear to my heart. And at Envisage, we had to do quite a bit of trying to figure out. We had a bunch of different market segments that we were trying to connect with. And like police and fire and EMTs all have very different needs. when you think about where they're doing their job and how they're doing their job, administrators versus someone who is trying to, one of the favorite things that I wanted to do and never did. One of our customers is the group that does the baggage at the airports. So making sure that nobody can get a bomb in was one of our clients, and both in the federal buildings and at the airports. And I wanted to actually figure out how the graders were making sure, as they're training people to do this job, how do they know that this person is doing a good job, and how are they doing this grading in the field? You have to really get into ethnographic studies, observing people doing the actual work. It's so shocking when you look at what people visually, like if you ask them questions, they will tell you what they think their process is. And then if you go and watch them do their process, you see all kinds of stuff that you didn't, like they didn't fail to, they just completely failed to mention. They just didn't even realize that it was part of their process. I think the easiest example that a lot of people use is making a peanut butter sandwich and trying to give somebody directions on how to do that. And if you actually follow the directions that some people give, you're not ending up with a peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
That's funny. Okay. Now you're going to have me. I'm going to go downstairs and hand instructions to my wife and just see what happens.
See what happens. I did consulting for a year right before coming to work at Paragraph, and that was pretty much the total focus of what I would help entrepreneurs do, is try to anticipate how are they going to get paid, and who is going to use their product, and how are they going to use their product, because you have to get to a minimum viable product at the beginning. When you're small and you're scrappy and starting out, you have to get to something that people will use and pay you for. And that's all about product market fit.
And there's a lot to unpack. Let's start with some of the founders who you work with. What's mindset that you see for the founders who really understand and appreciate the significance of what you're describing?
Well, I think they see it. They don't necessarily know how to get to it. So that's somewhat of a training issue sometimes. A lot of times it's a pivot from what they originally thought. You have to be an especially good listener, and it doesn't mean listening with your ears necessarily. You might have to listen with your eyes, or listen in the way that you see that they're not purchasing. They're using certain aspects, but they don't convert. So looking at your conversion rates and thinking about why, being curious about why they're not taking the next step, is a lot of what you need to do to get to that product market fit.
And so that brings up metrics. Any metrics in particular that you like to hone in on in the beginning?
There's so many metrics, but really I just want to see, I want to see who's buying, how much they're buying for, and then what's your churn. And churn, I think, is one of the most important metrics that you can have, because you can always do things that represent finding new customers. So when you think about, that's going to be your acquisition cost of your customer. We often talk about CAC. And then your annual contract value, ACV, you're going to look at that. But your churn rate, if you add 10 in the top of the funnel, and after renewal comes up, if 9 of those come out, then you have to do so much more work than if only 1 of those comes out. So I'm always looking for a very low churn rate as part of the work that our startups are doing.
And how, if we start to dissect churn or retention, do you have a sense? And let's keep everything. I'll keep it simple. Everything's B2B.
Okay, good.
Do you find, or what difference does it make, either the industry or where a company is on its growth trajectory?
I think it has more to do with the customers and how much you're actually solving their problem. But that may be a situation where I just think of all the different customers that we had. And when I think about churn, we were maybe solving their problem 60%. And if we were solving it 90%, they were less likely to churn. But if we were solving it 20%, like how much of the software they used, they were more likely. Also, when you have a champion who cares about your product and helps it be implemented, that is critical when you go to do renewals. If that champion is not there any longer, then you're likely to have churn. So that I think is more important, at least in my experience, that's been more important than industry. If people are subject to changing budgets, that's going to be a big influence. So looking at the macroeconomics, like where is money coming in and where is it going out? If you're doing something that's basically right now, you can look at where AI is going and see that lots of jobs are being displaced. If you have software that is serving the people that are being displaced, you're likely to not be renewed. So you really have to be forward looking in where things are going to consider where your renewals are going to be.
So a tiny bit in the weeds, but it
Yeah,
is a
sure.
topic that comes up a little bit, and that's you have founders, boards, investors who love the gross margins associated with software.
Sure. Who
And
doesn't?
but on the side, when you have a lot of software companies that at various stages they'll employ customer success teams, which if you're putting it in cost of sales is going to compress your gross margins. That said, I can't help but think of customer success in the description you're providing me around retention, because part of, hey, is your champion leaving, can only really be known if you're talking to your client versus
Totally.
just software. So would love your opinion on what's the role of customer success, and is there some periodicity that you think is best for maintaining a relationship with a client so that there aren't any surprises come renewal?
Yeah, I think that the tools have changed a lot. So you can get sentiment about what your customers are doing and how they're feeling about you in advance. Um, I think that the sort of gold standard at this point is your net promoter score and looking at how you're doing in that and then correlating that to renewals. And if you have a 9, then you're this likely to renew. And if you have an 8, you're like this likely to renew. I think that's pretty standard throughout. I I've been both on the startup and then through the private equity journey. And I would say that it's been really interesting to observe how much as a young startup, probably the thing that differentiates you a lot is your customer service. When your product isn't as awesome, then you can make up for a lot with kindness and you can get people to really be vision and understanding that you're helping them amazingly just by advocating for their features and doing all those sorts of things. But as the company scales, I see a lot of pressure, especially in the private equity space, to get rid of a lot of the customer success and to, if you need customer success for your product to be appealing, then you need to get back to that product market fit. Then you probably don't have good product market fit and you need to enhance that as opposed to supplementing it with people.
Interesting.
But people are always going to make up for a huge deficit in your software if they believe in any part of your business. If you aren't to like exact bow on a package level, people can always make up for that.
And when you're working with founders inside Paragraph, what's the counsel you provide them? At what point for how long do you think it's okay or reasonable to continue to maintain staff in the loop as you grow?
Uh, that's such a, I think it's on a case by case basis, just depending on what the software is. But I know we have some software that there are no people. And in other software, it's really a relationship sale. So it usually depends on what how much you sell the product for, what does the implementation look like, what is the software solving? Because it, I don't know, it's just, it seems more to do with expectations of people and what kind of problems they're going to encounter and what sort of help they need along the way.
So I heard you mention that you had a sales responsibility inside Envisage,
So
and
no, that's the only part I didn't do.
it was marketing, forgive me,
Yeah.
not sales. And so another conversation that I find myself in is you have something that resembles product market fit,
Awesome.
yet the world still doesn't know you exist.
Mm.
What's your experience like getting leads at the top of the funnel and making sure that the world knows you have a fantastic product?
It often comes down to where you're spending and trying to make sure that you're spending your resources in a good place. You need to understand who your buyer is and where they're going. I think the world has changed significantly in the last 3 years with influencers and how influencers are impacting product sales. It's not, I guess, Gladwell wrote the book Tipping Point and talked about connectors and mavens and how the conversations between them often cause a product to reach a tipping point. And I think we just do that electronically now instead of by word of mouth people eyes. But we've seen, I think, a lot of changes in the way that companies are spending money and in the way, if we look at the political campaigns and how that all played out and just seeing where money is being spent to influence vote, it's a very different situation than it was 10 years ago.
And I'd love to hear, so now that you were consulting and now Paragraph, I'd love to hear if there are any real world stories, both successes and failures, where you saw firsthand where the approach worked and didn't work in looking to get traction.
Sure. Gosh, I think some of them are yet to be determined. In one of our portfolio companies right now, we know we're going after agencies. And so we are doing some what we call painted door tests, which a painted door test is when you put a website up that represents what the product would be, and then you see who clicks on it. And when they click on it, you say, hey, this is coming soon. Would you like to be made aware of it? But it allows you to do a lot of marketing spend inexpensively and still garner the amount of input, knowing whether people would do it or not. A lot of times people famously say they would or wouldn't buy, but they don't actually click, or they do click. They're not, they might actually really think that they are going to buy something. And then when they get down to it, they don't actually want it. So the painted door is more not just your word of mouth, but it is, do you actually click on it? So I think that's a really good approach to take. And we've taken that one. I don't know whether that's going to be successful in this case. We were able, though, to look across 4 or 5 possible domains that we wanted to sell this. And we saw through the clicks that we didn't actually want to sell into real estate, or we didn't want to sell into a certain market because we just didn't have enough interest based on what was going on. Another portfolio company that we're working on right now is in the sports space, and that is a bunch of folks getting in a car and driving to athletic departments and creating a relationship and talking about software. And that seems to be a very relationship-based sale. And so I think that's going to be really successful in that way. They've been able to garner a lot of interest through that communication. We haven't seen an electronic version because, again, you're talking about, do they even go looking for that kind of stuff? No, that's not a situation where they're on the web searching for tools to do this kind of thing. But when one basketball coach hears about it and tells the football coach in the same university, and then that football coach is connected to another football coach. And because they're a really tight-knit group, then that's the way that product is likely to get sold for a long time.
Yeah, it seems like the referrals have always been a fantastic source of leads. My sense is that today, more than the past, given all the competition that's taking place for people's attention, that it absolutely is a source that all founders should be thinking about. And
Absolutely.
whether it's existing network or just asking for an introduction with a new client. A lot of founders in our audience would love to hear your advice for them as to how should they think about managing great growth, but also at the same time putting in place scalable or operations that will scale.
It really helps if you have seen what a scaled operation looks like. I was very fortunate to work for a Fortune 1000 company pretty much out of school, not quite my first job, but and having done that exercise, um, I understood then, oh, this is where we're trying to get to. And so when I started working in smaller companies, I knew our direction because I had already seen it at scale. So it's nice when you have the benefit of having seen it. Since you may be already founded and you're already on that journey, then I think it makes really good sense to find a mentor. And it's super interesting that as I've watched companies grow and been involved in investment banking sale of a couple of companies, I didn't realize when I was first starting out that there are people who run companies and sell them basically in a certain range. So like you might run your company up to 20 million and then it gets sold to somebody who runs it from 20 to 50, and then there's a kind of person who runs it to from 50 to 200, and then somebody who runs it after that. So I hadn't realized that ahead of time, and I think it's really important that if you really love doing 0 to 20, that you just do 0 to 20, and when it gets to 20 you sell and you give it to somebody else who really loves 20 to 50, and you go back to do 0 to 20 again. I think that a lot of times as founders, and I didn't realize this when I was first in Visage, that I was never expecting to get out of that business. Like it was my lifer business. I, I just didn't expect it at all. And then when we had need for more consistent capital, we went out looking for somebody who could help us grow. And when we did that, then they took a chunk of the business. And so now we're on a different trajectory. And we were able to scale really quickly because we had the revenue and the backstop when, in this case, it was the continuing resolution that would sometimes make us so that we weren't getting paid as a business. We knew we were eventually going to get paid, but we weren't getting paid on time. And so when we were doing that, we had to keep doing a stutter stop where we would go as fast as we could, and then our customers aren't paying us for a time, and so we have to slow the brakes. And then now we're run again because they're back to paying us. And so we did this stutter stop for a long time. And when we finally got some extra capital into the business, it really helped us to be able to run continually. And then we were able to see the really fast growth. But as we moved into different additional capital, wanted to come in and buy the business. So doing that transition, it was just something that it was transformative as private equity got involved. It was just very different how they wanted to see the business run.
I genuinely think it's great insight. My sense is a lot of time founders start companies without really having a sense of what the exit's going to look like, or even that it doesn't have to be a unicorn. There is such a thing as singles and doubles,
Yeah, for sure.
and also just playing to your strengths.
Absolutely.
Michelle, it's been a great podcast. Before we wrap up, last question. What advice would you give to any founders out there have an idea for a product and want to get started? And as far as just Here's what I asked you to think about if you're going to narrow your list.
I think it really comes down to deciding if you have the grit to love this idea for 10 to 15 years. I see a lot of people who think they want to be founders, and you have to be willing to stick through a lot of rough patches with an idea or a product or a pivot. You will have to pivot. You should just know that you're going to have to pivot as part of your business. You will have the possibility of death a couple of times. And if you don't pivot, your business will die. And if you do pivot successfully, it can continue on. But that whole process requires somebody who can get up every day and know it's going to be hard and do it again. For me, with mine, I have yoked myself to people that I know are going to get up every day and be like, wow, yesterday, man, that was terrible, but today is a new day. And I did that with every business that I've been in. Is I've looked for people that I know are just gonna get up and be that optimist the next day. And I can be that optimist too. Like some days when they're not able to pull that weight, I'm gonna pull that weight. But I think that knowing that you have that commitment for that long term is going to be the thing that's going to make the huge difference. And if you don't think you can do something, the same thing for 10 or 15 years, do something else that will pay better and will not require so much grit.
Yeah. Persistence, determination, resilience, without question.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So needed because it is an emotional roller coaster. And unless you're doing something that you enjoy, yeah, I agree with you. I think I would question getting started. Michelle, if there are any founders, co-investors, limited partners that want to get a hold of you, how can they find you?
Sure. They can just go to paragraph.ventures and submit their paragraph. Tell us about what they're wanting to do. And you can also individually, if you want to find me on LinkedIn, I'm Michelle Cole.
Fantastic. Michelle, thank you so much for being a guest on the Innovators Podcast. Again, everybody, Michelle Cole, partner at Paragraph.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Kristian Marquez here. Thank you so much for listening to the Innovators and Investors Podcast. If you are a successful founder or an investor, would like to be on the podcast, please visit podcast.finstratmgmt.com/podcast-guest. If you've got something out of this interview, please share this episode on social media. If you know someone that would be a great guest, please tag them on social media to let them know about the show and include the hashtag Innovators and Investors. I'd love to see your posts and suggestions. We're regularly putting out new episodes and content. To make sure you catch each new episode, please subscribe to the Innovators and Investors Podcast. And your thumbs up, ratings, and reviews go a long way to help promote the show, and it means a lot to me and my team. Would you like to know more? Go to our website, finstratmgmt.com, or follow us on LinkedIn or on X. Our handle is @finstratmgmt. This is Kristian Marquez. Thank you for listening. Until next time.